Yeah.
Okay, I think go ahead.
Okay, starting.
Yes.
All right. Thank you everybody for coming today, for joining us. As Aidan and Pastor Rob mentioned, the goal is not just about sharing scientific facts. We've been bombarded with all this, with the information and misinformation as well. But the main purpose of this is going forward, what are we going to do as individuals and as a church now that things are opening up? What do we do? Do we just forget about this and move on, or do we try to be cautious? And if so, what kind of measures do we need to be taking? So I'll just put a few reminders on like how this is transmitted, some unchanged facts, and then most of this stuff is still an ongoing progress, and I'll share what we know, and then we kind of try to discuss on okay, so what do we do now? All right, so these are just a few numbers. I know this is a crowded slide. This is just as of this morning. We are almost up to 6 million, not quite, but worldwide. And US is 1.7 million right now, and about Missouri, somewhere right here. Let's see, where are we? We're around 13,000, and then St. Louis, 4,832. There is some variation with the data, the statewide data and the nationwide data, but so I would try not to focus on that. But the deaths in St. Louis and Missouri in general are jumping. There's around 700 deaths reported currently, and within the last 24 hours, we had the highest number of reported deaths within a 24-hour period. So we had 31 deaths within the last 24 hours documented. That's the highest we had in Missouri so far. The highest before was sometime in April, and that was 29. So we don't know whether this is a sign that something else is happening. Is this another surge, or is this just one data, or should we infer anything from this? But needless to say, this is still going on. We just need to be watchful. All right, so part of this is what I kind of just talked about 13,000, and we had 122 new cases within the last 24 hours. In Missouri, deaths about 31, like I said, and currently there's around 30 within the last 24 hours, new hospitalizations. The ones on the vents, the numbers have gone down slightly. Last week it was around 92 people. Now it's down to 85. We have tested so far about 177,000 people. In our state, about 7.1% of them turned out to be positive. So, all right, I am sharing this slide just because we seem to be focused sometimes on that age. I'm not going to be affected because I'm not 65 and above, I'm not old. Most of these people, 65 and above, the numbers are actually not that high. Yes, they tend to be serious because these people are older and usually have comorbidities. But these people are also staying home. So the majority of the cases are ages between 18 to 64. And as we have seen, not everybody within this age group, whether they have some other illnesses that would put them at risk or not, are having some serious illnesses. It's not as common as the older folks, obviously, but we have had cases that someone with no comorbid condition, someone that's young, that have died, unfortunately, or people that ended up on a ventilator, or people that needed to go to a long-term care facility with a permanent tube inside of them, even in our city. So it's not just that, just age and comorbidities. Okay, transmission slides, we all know this, it's still true. The only thing is we were really focused on this, on the objects, you know, how long can the virus stay on surfaces, and that is still true. Like, you know, 72 hours on a plastic surface, stainless steel, you know, for our, those things are, they still hold true. What changed is when they tried to study, you know, how much of the virus is there on the surface. So after the 72 hours or within the 72 hours, 0.1% of the virus was there. Is it infective? Probably not as highly infective as we thought it was, but it also tells us that no, it wasn't just a, you know, hype. It wasn't a hyped up information, and we still need to clean our surfaces. The data is still there, but we're seeing maybe those surfaces are not as effective as we thought they were. So primarily the transmission is still person to person, and distancing and masking are all very important. As you all know, what makes this COVID-19 infection important is we all know to stay away from sick people. You know, if somebody's hacking and sneezing, you know, they need to stay home and you need to stay away from them. But the difference between this and the rest of other cases is because people are not symptomatic within the first few days, sometimes 4 to 6 days, and they do still start shedding within day 2 of being affected. So up to 50% of the infections spread are by people who are not showing symptoms, because usually once people start showing symptoms, hopefully they know better. All right, these are just a couple of example cases. You've probably heard about them. This is the church in Arkansas, you know, that we had the case reported in early March. This church had some sort of a children's event conference going on between March 6th through 8th. And the index cases are thought to be the pastor and his wife, who did not have symptoms during that time and started having symptoms March 10th. And over the 3-day period, there were around 90 something people that attended the events. It wasn't all in the same scenario. There were different exposure rates and what was going on. Some of them were small groups, some of them were large gatherings, and 35 people ended up being positive. 3 of them died. Not just that, but additional 26 people that were not at the church that came in contact with these people, with the church cases, were confirmed positive, and 1 of those people died. And contact tracing is very difficult. You know, you can't recall all of the people that you come in contact with. So this is not all we know, but at least, you know, that these things are important. The other one is the choir rehearsal. This is just to emphasize that, you know, closed spaces and, you know, proximity with people and the kind of activity that we're doing is significantly important. In this case, you know, there was 61 people, including the index case. There were 32 people were confirmed positive, but then there were 20 something people on top of that that were presumed positive because of the symptoms they were having, but they were not tested. And the testing criteria at the time was a little bit different. This was also sometime in March. 3 people are hospitalized, 2 people died. So there are certain activities, not just being in close proximity, but singing, because the amount of aerosols or the amount of droplets that you release when you're talking versus when you're singing are different. When you're singing, especially in loud settings, it is significantly more. So what happens once you get it? You know, 4 to 6, we talked about it, and then we usually release people from isolation around day 14. Okay, so what factors are important? Not everybody that gets exposed gets sick or gets the virus. So These are important things. One is the exposure dose and then the exposure time for how long. If you think about the exposure dose, high dose meaning someone is coughing or exercising in a gym, and that's a highly aerobic activity. So the amount of droplets that they're releasing when they're breathing hard versus just talking is different. So when somebody's coughing on you within that 6 feet distance, hopefully that's a brief moment, because as soon as you realize that, you should probably walk away. There's that. Or low doses, meaning somebody that's just talking. This image is not pretty accurate, the guy's sick, but you're just talking, having a conversation, you're in the same room, maybe still within 6 feet, but you're there for longer periods of time. So that those are the two things. Additionally, whether it was a closed space or was it outside? Is it well ventilated or is it a non-ventilated space? And as we said earlier, louder places are riskier because you emit more viruses when you're talking out loud or singing. If it's quieter, you're just walking or soft talking, that's a difference. That's also lower. So what do? Same things that we've been doing, the 6 feet distance, try not to touch your mouth, face, eyes, washing your hands according to the guidelines for 20 seconds and thoroughly with water and soap, wearing masks all the time when you're not at home, and then disinfecting surfaces, not just your the door handles or anything, but purses, cell phones, especially. These are highly okay. So this image just shows what happens within 6 feet. Somebody coughs or sneezes, the bigger circles are there, the droplets, and then the smaller ones are the aerosolized, or what we call the aerosols. So somebody that's not wearing a mask, when they cough or sneeze, and you're within that 6 feet distance, some of them, like the heavier, the bigger ones, they might drop on the surface and not all of it would come to you, obviously. But of the ones that come to you, that you inhale, then the larger droplets kind of get stuck in the upper airway, your nose, your pharynx, and things like that. And the smaller they are, they're able to get down to the air sacs and things like that. So cloth masks, surgical masks block these bigger droplets, and then the small aerosols can only be blocked by 95 masks. All right, so I'm going to come back to this slide. So as you can see, not everybody can get a surgical mask or an N95 mask, so that's why the CDC recommended making DIY cloth masks. And from what we see, wearing a mask does not protect the mask wearer as much as the person that is within that is in close proximity with that person. Yes, it does have some protection, but it is more for the other person. It's more for the neighbor. So we're basically doing it for other people, and because we don't know who has it and who doesn't. I mean, I feel fine right now, but if I just go out and about without wearing a mask, I am risking everybody else that comes in contact with me, even though I'm not showing symptoms. So the best thing is, and it is not easy. I mean, I wear glasses, so I totally understand the difficulty of wearing a mask. It's foggy, we're not used to it. But when we make it a habit, when they are worn as a general precaution, then it aims to prevent people who are unaware that they're sick from unknowingly transmitting the virus to others. And the most important thing is, just because you're wearing a mask does not mean you can go out and about and do whatever you want. You don't have to wash your hands, or, it's not a replacement for social distancing. So those are the ones. So now back to that slide. Obviously the N95 masks are way more protective than the surgical face mask or the cloth masks. But if I could have your attention draw your attention to this particular images. So this lady has COVID. She's a COVID carrier, asymptomatic probably, and she's not wearing a mask. The other person who's healthy is wearing a mask. The transmission probability is about 70%. This person, even though she's doing her due diligence by wearing her mask, just because this person that's infected is not, she will probably get infected. Now, what happens if we reverse the scenario? If the carrier is wearing a mask and the supposedly healthy person does not wear a mask, the probability is about 5%. If both wear masks, then this drops the probability to about 1.5%, which is pretty significant. So when we're wearing a mask, this is just to drive that point again, we are doing it to protect other people. And by doing that, and if everybody wears masks, we try to, we protect each other. So that way everybody is protected. Okay, so the lowest risk of not being infected is obviously not going out of the house. The stay in place order was meant for that. So you stay at home as much as possible. You limit the number of people that come to your house. You wash your hands. If you're sick, even if you're at home, you try to isolate yourself from the family members for some period of time so that you don't spread it around. But we can't do that forever. And that's why, the economy has to open, the church, churches are talking about reopening, businesses are starting to operate again, not just from the economic standpoint, but even mentally speaking. You can't just, we're not meant for this kind of life. You can't just stay at home alone forever. So moderate risk would be, okay, so you take a walk, you walk your dog, you ride a bike. You're putting yourself at risk and others at risk. But when you wash your hands, you try not to touch your face, and then you're trying to keep that 6 feet distance and wearing a mask, then, and not sitting on a park bench or, avoiding the playgrounds and things like that, you are minimizing the risk significantly. Outdoor gatherings, yes, they are outdoors, but because you're with other people and it puts you at a higher risk. But when you're, doing all these precautions, you're trying to keep the distance and not sharing food, toys, other items. And as long as these activities are infrequent, then you can still do some of this stuff with being careful and trying to minimize your exposure. The highest risk is with indoor gatherings. This is a movie theater, churches, other things. But even with this, there has to be the 6 feet distance. Everybody should be wearing a mask, no food sharing. And even with a closed space, you try to open the windows and allow outside air to come and circulate. But the best thing to do is to try to avoid meeting indoors if at all possible. All right, so ways to go out and still stay safe. Stick to the outdoors, good hygiene practices, wear a mask, stay away from crowded settings, avoid shared surfaces, and don't go to the grocery store every day, so that's what it means by spacing out these trips outside the home as much as possible, because that it's a low exposure, low viral load, but if you're doing it more frequently and if it's for a prolonged period of time, like we said, it increases your likelihood. Creating a close circle with specific friends and family. I would like to stress on this a little bit because especially now, we're all tired of staying at home. We haven't seen our friends. So our mental health is also very important, it not just from getting bored standpoint, but people feel lonely. So it is a good thing to meet up with people, but as long as, especially with people that are following the same guidelines as you are. So being accountable to each other and doing it outdoors and within that safe distance and wearing masks, those things still come in handy. And if you're at risk group, not just with age, but if anybody that has some other health concerns, then you need to be extra careful. Okay, another crowded slide, but I'm almost done. So checklists. When we think of all these 6 feet distancing, the social distancing factor, hygiene and things like that, when you think of a church scenario, it's not easy because you're not just dealing with yourself, we're dealing with a large community in a church like ours. So everyone has to follow the prevention guidelines, meaning if one person is not doing it, then, you know, it exposes, we are risking everybody that's coming. So making sure we have enough, you know, stations that we can wash our hands. Hand sanitizers basically everywhere, preferably the no-touch ones, but even if we have the ones that are, that we have to touch, just making sure we have enough, and not just rely on, you know, disinfectants that people carry in their purses, because those are not enough. And we're doing a lot of contamination when I'm taking out a hand sanitizer, giving myself one and then doing it for somebody else because they didn't bring theirs. So it's better if we have some, you know, stations that that offer that, which would be a good idea. And then the disinfecting factor, yes, the risk is smaller, but we still, especially like doorknobs, commonly used surfaces. If we had automatic doors, that would be great, but we don't. So in those cases, in the event that we're coming inside, which is not ideal anyway, whenever we're talking about door handles, those need to be disinfected. And you try not to touch them, you know, have something at hand that you can use to open it. And if items like musical instruments, I don't know what the guidelines or what from a technical standpoint, I don't know how often you can sanitize keyboards or some musical instruments or speakers for that matter. So if it's something that cannot easily be cleaned or sanitized, then we try to avoid using it just to minimize the exposure. Making sure our vent system is working, which is an ongoing challenge. And try to get an outdoor air, because trying to make sure that we're not just recycling that same air that's in that space, but when the doors are open or the windows are open, then there's circulating happening, and limiting the size of gathering. Right now with phase 1 opening, they have not, yes, there's a recommendation to still keep it under 10, but in a space that we can, if you can still do those things, you know, be 6 feet apart and can hold more people are still doing it. But the issue is, if the space is limited and you're telling everybody to be 6 feet apart from each other, then we can easily run out of space. So, you know, be cognizant of the size, and limiting the size of gathering is important. And then considering outdoor services. I mean, the weather is nice right now. So, and for all the reasons that we talked about earlier, it would be great if we can, you know, do things outdoors. But even with outdoors, we still need to keep 6 feet distance, and we still need to wear masks. I didn't know what 6 feet meant before this COVID business, because I'm not used to the feet system, but now I do. But for some people, it's helpful, as you've seen in the stores or most of the places, you know, having a physical guides help. And sometimes, you know, if it's hallways, making sure it's one way as opposed to two way, because you're trying to do 6 feet, but then one person's coming from the other way and you're going the opposite direction. That hallway does not have 6 feet in between. So being, you know, just thinking about all those things. So that's why even though we're 6 feet, we need to wear masks. Sharing books, could be the Bibles, could be him, whatever it is, or these flyers that go out usually, making sure those things happen. Offering boxes, instead of, you know, having, we don't have a designated collection thing. Pastor Rob has been using all sorts of things, and he's been creative. But it would be better if we can have a collection box, like we've been talking for a long time now, that's stationary, and everybody can go and put that, whether it's outside or inside, whatever we decide to do. And then avoiding physical contact as much as possible, you know, no hugging, none of that stuff. And if food is offered, ideally no food. If food is offered, it has to be in prepackaged, individual. You know, if somebody wants to give out chips, it has to be in individual bags. We can no longer have these big chips that everybody, or you know, Doritos, everybody can share from. And then if you're sick, obviously stay home. And you know, in light of recent events, the Missouri governor has now we were the limit for the phase 2, we're reopening to phase 2 on Monday, but now that's delayed. He would like to continue this, and we're still going to be in phase 1. We're not advancing until June 15, and then we're going to reassess. So we're still going to remain in phase 1. Just to highlight on what it means, you know, phase 1, phase 2, they're using symptoms like, are symptoms going downwards? Are the number of new infections going down? What's our hospital capacities like? So that's how they decide on advancing, whether, you know, phase 1 to phase 2 to phase 3 and things like that. So we're still in phase 1. Missouri is not advancing to phase 2, at least for the coming 2 weeks. And the other thing is, in light of, I don't know what the last 24 hours mean. Like I said, we've had an increase in the numbers. It's still too soon to tell whether it's a result of our reopening. Probably not, maybe yes. But hospital admissions are increasing just within the last 24 hours, and death, you know, is higher. It probably does not mean anything, but it might. So, you know, it's a trend. We just want to keep that downward trend, do what we're doing, what we've been doing. And I have, you know, yes, there are some things that you see around, but for the most part, people are doing what they're supposed to do. And this is just to encourage you to keep doing what you're doing, and then try to answer some questions if you have any. So I think this is the end of my slide. Yes.
Thank you, Pomi. Just want to see if Nure, if there's anything else you want to add, or you're good. If not, we'll go.
Yeah, I think Pomi has covered most of it. It's just a few points from the church standpoint. I mean, as you heard, the church is a perfect place where transmission can easily happen. If you see, you know, how close we are, how much hugging there, you know, the singing, you know, you see it perfectly where transmission can happen. So we know businesses, churches are reopening, but as a church, we're taking a slow approach. So we are waiting and see when best would be to open the church. But the steps we are taking, like trainings like this, and also getting supplies. We are ordering masks, gloves, you know, increasing our sanitation stations, trying to come up with a protocol where we can work on when we open the church. So we have not have a definite time when we may open, but it's a wait and see. We want to minimize the risk and make sure we're safe when we open.
It is time for Q&A. And for those of you who have already joined, you can either speak up or you can type it, whichever route you want to take. And as we're asking questions, let's ask for ourselves, and let's also ask for our friends that have not joined. If you've heard any of your friends express whatever question, this is an opportunity to say something for you and for our loved ones. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
So obviously, without question, where we have English service is now off limits for only that once we open, correct?
Say that again?
The fellowship hall will only be used when open for English service only.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I think that I don't think in the half time. Yes. I think we should dedicate it to, you know, the English service alone, if, you know, and when we open it up. Yeah.
Now, in the English service, when we set those chairs apart 10, 6 feet, whatever, if they are adequately spaced out, are masks still required for those sitting and listening to the service?
Are masks still required? Is that what you asked, Pastor Rock?
Will masks be required with seating 6 feet or further apart?
I mean, based on, because we will be singing and worshiping. So it's one of those, highly, based on what we know so far, it's one of those things that would be considered, we're high risk, because one, you're in a closed space. If it was, and then you're also singing, worshiping. So regardless of the distance, you're still putting each other at risk by not wearing masks. So that would be my recommendation. I don't know if anybody else has any input in this. Okay.
Well, I mean, as Pomi pointed out, even though we keep the 6 mission, I think 6 part plus a mask would be ideal. As a church, we have not decided,
I'll just mute. Continue.
required. But I think that's the direction likely we have not decided yet. But if you see the ways this virus transmitted, I think in order to maximize, our prevention strategy, I think probably we need a mask and as well as 6 feet sitting apart. Yeah.
Any questions? Now's the time to ask, guys. We may not have the answer, but like I said, I think we all agree that this is a fluid situation. Things may change depending on the data and things that come out as the weeks and months go throughout 2020. So it's good to ask anything that you might pop into your head.
Some of you, I may have muted you in between when I heard sound, so unmute yourself if you want to ask questions.
Unmute.
Hey, Nure,
Yes.
have we done any assessment regarding the church size and see if we can start service, how many people can we seat either upstairs or downstairs?
I mean, honestly, we have not, made our final assessment, but we kind of discussed roughly maybe, the main sanctuary may hold up to 40 people, if we make every other bench not be occupied and put people 6 feet apart. And the good thing is families kind of sit together as a family, but those who are in families should sit 6 feet apart. So we may have like 40 people downstairs. I'm not sure upstairs. I don't know. You guys may have a better idea, but I think up to 40.
Are we going to put together a checklist for our members to have in regards to some of the basic things that will not change, like self-assessment before you come to church, fever check,
Yeah.
etc.
Sure. So, we're discussing, how much of, the recommendations we can adopt to the church. I mean, I think, the standard would be checking symptoms and temperature. We're buying thermometers. We have not decided whether we actually are checking temperatures. We're buying masks. We have to decide whether that's a requirement. And also seating, we should be able to put signs where people can sit 6 feet apart, even, in terms of when they in, there should be an exit, there should be, as with entrance signs, and also we should put signs on the surface where people are marked. So we are working on those steps. I think likely we're gonna have temperature checks, symptom check as well, and mask may be required, and sitting apart 6 feet apart, and cleaning surfaces was a challenge. I mean, how many things are you gonna be cleaning? It's a lot. So yeah, we are working on that. We are.
Okay, good.
My other, the other thing is, this is mainly for the sanctuary space because it's relatively bigger, we do those things. And then also we're going to have, post, both in English and Amharic, all these things kind of everywhere, making sure that people are constantly reminding, sort of like the checklist and things that we should be doing everywhere. But the other issue is bathrooms. There's only, the way to the bathroom and out, both the downstairs bathroom, the upstairs bathroom, and the main bathrooms. Those are high risk areas because that is the only place, well, except for the kitchen, that people can go in and actually wash their hands. So that is also a big problem. We can maximize the hand sanitizing, but we don't have enough washing stations as of now. So unless we're making, these makeshift work stations where people can wash their hands. And the other issue is, and we kind of talked about before, but with the English service, because, if everybody drives or anything, things like that, and if, because, most people don't have kids, it may not affect a lot of people, but for people that with little kids that require this, me being selfish, thinking about myself too, but that require childcare, the children's area is totally out of question because of there's no ventilation there. There's no, you've seen the place, ventilation area, and you can't tell kids, oh, don't touch each other, don't do this, don't do that. So the stairs are a problem, their classrooms are a problem. So unless, we're rotating family members, and somebody comes one time, the other person comes, even for childcare purposes by itself, not a lot of people will be able to attend just because we can't accommodate kids where we are right now.
So let me hear you correctly. You're saying that children's areas is completely blocked off.
Well, I don't know this when it would be ready, but right now, if you think about it, those areas, because of all these things we talked about, one is the distancing, but the ventilation area and all those things, you really can't do much with that. It will be up for discussion and just trying to adapt, like Nura said, all the spaces, see what we can do. I don't see it right now, at least. It would be very difficult. Manpower, how many people would you have there?
Yeah, I think, and I also can comment. I think children ministry probably would be the last we would be able to open up because of our space, because of we can't make sure they stay apart. It's tough. And you can't put a mask on the little ones either. So it's going to be the last one. That's why probably we're thinking a phased approach. That's going to be the last. We should make sure they have enough space. And also make sure it's well ventilated, which we can't change. We can't change much of the structure of the building right now. So I think it's going to be probably the last one that will start children's ministry right in the building.
I just want to remind everyone, though, the fact that we're not able to join in person in church does not mean church is stopping. Yeah. Church needs to continue in whatever form that we can have, right? This is one way of church. Right now, we're getting a chance to see each other, and so we need to continue that. With kids, we're considering, and it's still, the date and when is still questioned, but if any, we may be able to arrange some activities where we could meet outside, like parks and things like that, with a lot of help from all the parents, right? So, but the previous model where kids are left to one or two adults to manage them is going to be pretty difficult, especially the younger, the more complicated it gets, right? So I guess a question from my end, and thank you, Pumi, for that presentation. It's like we've heard this a lot of times, but the way you brought it up, it kind of drove some points to me. What I heard you say is that for us to be able to open up church, there's also needs to be some trust within each and every one of us have some level of precaution on our own, right? So if I'm not being careful in my daily in and out, and I still come to church whenever we open up, I could be the door for that infection to happen, right? So for our church opening, the reason why we're having this kind of discussion way early is because whatever we're doing on our daily lives is going to also have an impact on our church opening, on effectiveness of the church opening safely. I think that for me, that's what I drew out of your presentation. Any more questions?
It's a general question for Pastor Rowe and the group. I mean, at some point, I know if the English ministry would open up, I mean, as you can see, starting outdoor services seems to be less risky. Do you see that happening? I mean, do you have an idea of how we may be able to do that?
Yeah, in the back of the church is beautiful out there. We can take advantage of that. I'm all about that.
Gotcha.
That's something we can definitely discuss further. Obviously, we would have to let other church members know as we would designate or rope off an area. Obviously, we'd have more room for even further outdoor seating. So that's a very good. I wouldn't even say good possibility. I think we will probably do that. I think a lot of people actually enjoy that.
I see a question via chat from Kalai. Kalai, I don't think I understand your question. Does this include Curry class? Are you talking about using the basement? Is that what you're asking? There's a question that says, okay. Yeah, I think the basement, we need to figure out the area better. Right now, the way it is hard to justify to use it, especially Curry's class. That's a big class. That the number, I don't see the area that they're meeting to be able to do social distancing effectively. So that room that they have, the only way that room could work is if they can sit each other close to each other.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine that space to be used for 6 feet, maybe. Yeah, and being the basement, the air circulation, all of that, there's limitation to that. That being said, to Nure's, like right now, I don't think, there are some work that we need to do in this planning time is to have people work through the detail and come up with solutions. Right? For any problem, there is some solutions that we can come up, but as of now, the way it is, that's where we are.
Come on, I know you guys got some more questions.
I know some of you joined halfway or at the end. You can always go back and listen to the YouTube video for the information. But even if there is any general question you have on this COVID-19, we have pretty good doctors in the room. And if it is also spiritual questions, we have amazing pastors. So any question is okay. That's right.
I just make one comment if I'm audible.
I can hear you. Go ahead.
All right, good. It is nice to see everybody, and I'm glad to see your faces. And thank you, Pomi, for your presentation. And thank you, Dr. Nuri, also for your inputs and everybody else. So one point that I just want to make is it is our responsibility as stewardships of the flocks of the God or for the people of God. We do have responsibility, and that's one part of the responsibility that we are speaking about. And that is we are comparing the risks. What would be the risk of opening, and what would be the risk of not opening? And probably we are going to continue to discuss about it, to mature it, and to do it in a wise way. But if we could do it in a more responsible way, it could be very advisable, because the ramifications of it is not going to be easy. We are speaking about death, and that is huge. that is huge. Its impact is very huge. So what I would have said is, it is better always to think and rethink. And with our culture, I would like to be very open. With our culture, it's also very not easy. It's not easy. It is, we do have difficulties of following orders. Sometimes we take it for, oh yeah, I'm trying to be honest. Sometimes we take it easy, and sometimes we say, oh, it's okay. Even I do have,
Right? Yeah. I was
yeah,
thinking.
even if I do have a mild fever, it's going to be okay. I don't want to miss this one, and I have to come to this one. We do have this kind of tendencies. That's who we are, and these things are not. This is not a time for men like this one. So it is better to come up together like this one, to discuss it, to nail down it, to come up with every kind of precautions that we should have to think. But speaking spiritually, we do have a fellowship, we do have a prayer, we do have a teaching, and it's far more better than we had before. Speaking of a spiritual thing, so we don't miss anything. Actually, we don't miss anything spiritually. We are not missing anything. In fact, we are adding much more what we had before. So I'm not discouraging from reopening, but from spiritual point of view, we are not missing anything. But if we want to also go ahead and to open it, we have to compare the risks, and we have to take all the precautions, because with our limited resources and the infrastructure containment that we do have, or the problem that with our church infrastructure, we do have a problem with that one also. The entrance, the exit, the toilets, the kids' rooms, and the big church, even the big church, it is the windows. It is only circulated. The windows are there, but it's not as much as big. So we do have infrastructure problems as well. So I would like to encourage to continue such kind of discussion that we do have today, to continue to plan it. But from my stand, I don't want to hurry to go to the opening thing, because we have to do our homework and due diligence before we think about that, because the risk is not the risk is not comparable. It is huge. Thank you.
And I think there's a comment on the chat box, and exactly what I was thinking. For the adults, there is a lot going on. Just to give you some ideas, there's 3 times a day prayer, early in the morning, midday, and night. It's not everybody's joining, but whoever can. Okay. Stop calling you, Pastor. Anyway, my point is, it's a question, right? So for the adults, there is that kind of stuff going on, but I want to hear from our youth. How do you feel? Do you feel like there's enough programming going on to both to get connected as a group, and also, for that spirituality? And maybe that's the question that we need to ask them this time, is that what can we do more to have more opportunities for people to get to pray together, and also share. Yeah, like I said, church should not stop. Church should continue. Not it may not look like the same way. It is, we're used to it, but COVID is not going to stop church. I just want to make sure that we have that mindset as we continue. Okay, that's a good point. Any other comment from anyone? It's a safe group, please. Ask questions. We're kind of running time. I mean, I was thinking an hour, or an hour and a few minutes. So the opportunity to ask question is coming down. So please ask if you have any questions. You can either put it on the chat box, or we can
Either put it on the chat box, ask now, or put it on a pigeon and send it to one of the leaders. We will be doing pigeon ministry where we
Yeah,
transfer
where's the picture? I
messages.
can hear it, but I can't see it.
Hey, Susie, you've been recruited.
For those of you who have joined and have
Wait.
not left us with your faces, I'm a little sad because I really want to see you guys because I've missed you.
Yeah. Unmute your faces so we can see. Make sure we're not being spied upon by.
You may have a special hairstyle or you don't want to miss that.
Oh, here we go. It's Betty here.
Hey,
Hey,
Calling
Kalai.
me out. Hey, see, Kalai.
Hey, Kalai.
Look at that guy. Look,
Oh, hey, hey. Hey.
you look like you're from Duck Dynasty.
That looks really nice.
Hey, actually, I had a question. What current programs do we have for like middle schoolers and high schoolers outside of Sunday?
Sesame Street.
Yeah.
So,
That's where it's at.
Kalai, would you like to take that answer for middle school, high schoolers? And Kabri, I don't see Kani. Or is Kani in?
No, I don't think so.
Kalai, go ahead.
So for middle school, we have the Friday service that we do with them. Originally, the plan was to have twice a week, where one day was just going to be Connect, but it ended up being too much for them just because a lot of them couldn't make both days. But we have the Connect group / Bible study, and then on Sundays they have Kubri's class, which is kind of the two ongoing things right now.
Awesome. Congratulations, by the way, Kalai.
Thank you, thank you.
Hey.
Congratulations.
You graduated,
And
Kalai? Did you?
Constance.
Did you graduate?
Hey.
Yes.
Are
Thank
you
you.
guys ready for
Congratulations.
your parade?
Yeah, we'll see.
Constance,
I'm sorry, say it again.
are you ready for your parade?
She's joining the military. She doesn't get a parade.
Baby, congratulations. You don't look like a mommy at all. I don't know how you do it.
But I have proof.
She's here.
She sleeps in style.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Any questions?
Hi, Betty.
How you doing?
Well, how are you? Looking good.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Kubri. Good to see you. Hiwat, good to see you. All right, everybody's opening up. Thank you. Hi, Lee. Good to see you too.
Hi, Betty.
Oh, good day.
Oh.
Good day. All right, Kubri, I see you too. Any more questions? We can turn off the YouTube and continue some
Utilizing time.
just fellowship time if we need to.
I think Pastor Rob has a prayer meeting, right? Right after this.
We're going to do that later.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Is there any like closing message anybody wants to give before I remove the live stream? Pastor
I was going to ask if you would close in prayer once we are done. I guess my last comment would be again, the situation will be continually, nothing is for certain. So we're in this together as we move forward in the reopening of the church. And I just ask people to be patient, as well as to be part of the solution. I know a lot of people will have some frustrations and why this, what this, but really just remember we're all moving towards the same goal. And that's to honor God as we reopen the church, but at the same time, doing the best we can responsibly to keep the safety of our members and the community. And so we're marching forward. Be patient, and God will be with us.
Amen.